Today, I'm going to share with you 3 stories that together prove one thing: that sometimes reality plagiarizes fiction badly. But before we get started, if you think your mind can withstand stories so dark they make Edgar Allan Poe look like a children's entertainer at a gluten-free birthday party, then congratulations. You might be deranged enough to hang around here. And if that's the case, maybe you could do me a small favor. You see the like button? It's been running around the internet calling itself the muse of all engagement. I think it's time that someone critiqued its performance violently. And if you're new here, my name is Mr. Bard. I'm a professional storyteller and exorcist of algorithms. I post twice a week, or whenever the police have finished questioning me about narrative-related crimes. So before we dive in, make sure that you subscribe, you know. In 2009, a woman named Lydia Payne moved into a small apartment in Portland, Oregon. She was a nursing student and didn't have a lot of money, so when she found an apartment that was clean, cheap, and close to where she worked, she signed the lease immediately. But from the very first night, Lydia noticed something that was off about her new apartment. The mirror in the bathroom, a big oval antique one dating back to the 1940s, was always fogged up, no matter how long she left the door open for. And every time she looked at it, there was movement behind her, like something stepping out of frame. Lydia told herself that it was just exhaustion from all the shifts she was doing, until one night, around 3 a.m., she came home and had a shower like she always does. It was late, but being a shift worker, she was used to it. She didn't like climbing into bed covered in hospital germs. So Lydia had been living in this new apartment for over a week now. But this time when she stepped out of the shower, she noticed something strange. The mirror, that had always been fogged up, was now completely clear. She did think that was weird, especially since she just had a shower. But just as she was thinking of an explanation, she looked back into the reflection, and standing directly behind her, silhouetting her body, was a dark figure. It was standing so perfectly behind her that she could only just make out its outline. But she had that feeling you get when you know someone is standing close. Lydia spun around, but saw nothing. So when she turned to look back into the mirror, the words "Arbeit macht frei" appeared before her. Lydia screamed and threw a towel over the mirror, and she decided that that night she was going to sleep in her car, because she believed that her house or the mirror was haunted. And she knew that ghosts don't haunt cars, only houses and antiques. The next morning, Lydia called her landlord to find out where the mirror came from, because she believed that it was the focal point of all these strange phenomena. The landlord answered the phone, and when Lydia asked him where the mirror came from, he paused and then said, "That belonged to the previous tenant. Her family said I could keep it there because that's where she always liked to do her makeup," which is weird because everyone does their makeup in front of the mirror. After a long silence, the landlord added, "She also made annoying phone calls This is the third time this week that you've called me, and it's always while I'm taking a dump. So, Lydia asked what happened to the previous tenant. He sighed, hesitant to answer. But then he said, one night, she had a burrito dinner, followed by a shower, which acted as a sort of chamber for her gas, and so she suffered hypoxia and died right then and there. Her family offered to let us keep her dead body there because that's where she liked to do her makeup. And I was like, yeah, you told me about the makeup already, and no, I don't want the dead body. I'll keep the haunted mirror though. Lydia moved out that weekend, and 2 weeks later when a new tenant moved in and called about the foggy mirror, the landlord replied, oh yeah, the previous tenant said that, so I had the mirror looked at. Turns out, it's haunted by Hitler's ghost. Now, if you're wondering how we were able to piece all of that story together, as it turns out, I was the landlord all along, and I watched my tenants through video cameras. In 2017, there was a retired carpenter named Peter Langford who lived on the outskirts of Murray Bridge, South Australia. For years, he was known as a quiet, practical man, the sort that would fix your gate without asking and wave from across the street as you passed on by. But at some point during that winter, the light went on in his backyard shed and didn't turn off. Plus, people hadn't seen Peter for weeks, and so the close-knit community began to talk about it. Police finally went to check on him, and so they knocked on the door, and surprisingly, Peter answered, like nothing was even wrong. And when asked about the shed, he simply replied, I'm working on a hydroponic garden project. So they asked if they could look inside, but he refused. Since Peter was fine and had a perfectly good explanation for his backyard shed, the police decided to leave it at that. But as they were leaving, a boy walked past bouncing a football. And while that doesn't affect the story, it is in fact what happened. Immediately after that, they hear a loud smash coming from the backyard, and a man covered in blood comes sprinting around the corner and into the front yard, shouting for help. The man comes running all the way up to the police officers and then collapses, but one of them is able to grab him before he can hit the ground, while the other one draws his pistol on Peter. The first one manages to lay the man gently on the lawn and then places Peter in cuffs. Now, the officers aren't asking to see inside the shed, they're demanding. So, Peter leads them around into the backyard, and as they're walking up to the shed, the door is wide open, so they can already see that this is no ordinary tool shed. One officer stayed with Peter, while the other went in to investigate, and this was like stepping into a house of horrors. He found a chair bolted to the ground, there was a radio on low static, and the entire room was just covered in layers of dried and fresh blood. He would also find a notebook with names and dates that would later turn out to be related to men who had gone missing over the past 20 years. When detectives brought Peter in for questioning, he would put up this huge fuss. First, he claimed sovereign citizenship, then demanded not to be touched. He would repeatedly burst out into tears, asked to use the bathroom, asked to make a phone call. demand to speak to the supervisor. But when he realized that none of these tactics would get him out of the situation, he finally calmed down and started answering questions. So the detectives decided to cut to the chase and asked Peter, "Why did a bloodied man bust out of your shed and start screaming for help?" He just sat there, smiled slightly, and then responded, "Ooh," and then just evaporated into thin air. As it would happen, Peter was a ghost the whole time. In 2018, a university student named Liam Simpson lived in Victor Harbor, South Australia. Liam was your average student. He liked computer science, played a big guitar, and liked to binge horror movies. One weekend, his roommates started to notice something unnatural. He would speak in voices that weren't his own, muttering things that made no sense. They even found him mashing on his keyboard, repeating the phrase magnum opus. At first, they thought it was stress, or maybe too much caffeine. But then, things escalated. Objects seemed to move around on their own. Doors slamming by themselves, books falling off of shelves, and one time, a chair tipped over while Liam wasn't even near it. Terrified, they decided to call a priest, who agreed to perform an exorcism. During the ritual, Liam's behavior grew even more strange. He spoke in a low, guttural voice, and there was foam forming at the edge of his ever-clenched mouth, and his eyes were so wide open you could barely even see his eyelids. And plus, he seemed to know things about the priest that he hadn't said aloud. But just as the priest was about to say the final prayer, Liam stopped. He smiled sheepishly and he asked, "Sorry, what's going on?" The priest and Liam's friends were just totally confused, and so they explained to Liam his behavior and how much it was terrifying them. And Liam just laughed, and he said, "Oh yeah, I accidentally ate a whole bag of meth, and then I blacked out. Have I been acting weird?" Thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. Don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing stories that relate to the chaos that I share with you, and who knows, I might even steal one of them for upcoming content. And don't forget, I've got plenty of videos for you to enjoy, probably more than you can handle. Alright guys, that's enough from me. Till next time.